All right, let's talk about that period of time before a competition when people start to freak out about their weight. And that is usually the 5 to 6 week out mark. And that's when people start to panic and probably make the wrong decisions. Okay, so let's paint the picture here. We are about, let's say, 6 weeks out from your competition. Your weight's a little bit heavy, or you're in a good range to make the cut, but everybody kind of freaks out about a cut bigger than sometimes 5 pounds, sometimes 10 pounds. Okay, so let's say you're anywhere between 10 and 15 pounds over, right? So what do we do in this time? What I usually look at, one, are we going to have to do a water load? Probably. Now, are we in a good spot to make that as easy as possible? Maybe. Kind of depends on what we've been doing diet-wise or what you've been doing diet-wise leading up to that time, okay? So if I've been working with somebody for a while, I'm usually comfortable if we're around 10, 15 pounds, even a little bit heavier. Most of the time I'm usually comfortable having them make that cut and knowing that it's not really gonna be that bad. If you are somebody coming to me, in prep for a competition, that short window, or say like 2 months out, I usually go with my approach based off of what you've been doing prior, okay? So if, say, we're a little bit heavy and you come to me and you're like, hey, I gotta get my weight down, I gotta make this, I gotta be able to make weight at, 10, 15 pounds lighter, whatever, then I will kind of base that approach off of what you've been doing prior, right? So if it's been, kind of a mess, or you've been under eating, or, whatever the thing is, I'm going to look at setting you up for making the cut as easy as possible, which may mean that we are not going to necessarily focus on dieting down, but we are going to more focus on keeping low stress and getting enough carbs in, okay? Now, if you're somebody who's got things on point and you're like, I just need, the accountability or somebody to help me not stress out, then, we may look at like, okay, we're gonna try to diet down a little bit, get us in a little bit closer range to make that cut. But this is all case to case dependent. But what I usually look at and what I usually tell people is don't start stressing, okay? Because we're gonna start, one, we're training hard, so we're getting in that closer window where stuff's getting heavy. You're getting, training fatigue getting high. Mentally, you're getting kind of stressed out because you don't feel like you're ready for some events or all the events. And sleep could be a factor here. So really trying to do things to mitigate stress. The next thing I look at is keeping carbs as high as possible, okay? Because if we are, no matter what the cut is, if we keep our carbs as high as we can going into that cut week, it's gonna make it easier, no matter we're gonna load or if we're tapering out carbs, it's gonna make us have a lot more room to pull from, right? Especially if we're doing a water load, we don't wanna super restrict carbs and then in turn raise our stress to make that harder, because I've done this myself, and I've had people that have had this problem where we go into that cut week, not eating a lot of carbs or super stressed out or a little bit of both, and the cut is terrible and you get nothing out of the water load, and then you end up, sweating out a ton. So in this window of time, this is not a good time to be thinking that, more calorie restriction is better, because at the end, it could make it harder for you, okay? And most people walk around heavy, okay? Most people are not walking around at what their comp weight is, okay? So if you're a 90 kilo guy, most people are walking around a little bit heavier than that, okay? So it's important to understand that, you're gonna have to do some type of cut or some type of taper of food, carbs, whatever, the week of, 2 weeks out, something like that to help make weight. So it's good to just not stress it. And I know it's hard to not stress it because you're thinking, well, what if I put in all this work and what if I miss weight? So the easy answer there is just make sure you don't miss weight. So we're keeping carbs as high as we can and we're trying to manage stress. What does that look like? So that comes down to recovery, sleep, and those two go together, and something that is helping you prioritize and kind of cut out external factors, right? So this is a good time to kind of assess, what's all going on in your life and prioritize kind of what's happening and what needs your attention, okay? You've put in all of this work and you're going into a competition. Maybe it's a big competition, maybe it's, a local show, something, or you're trying to get qualified for something, but it's important to kind of prioritize and be like, okay, I've spent all this time getting ready for this. I have XYZ going on outside of that, but in the next month or so, those aren't super important. So I can kind of put those on the back burner until after the competition, okay? And that goes to really what I look at with really a big one here is fatigue, right? So if we are, say you have a physical job and you're training and you have home projects, right? So physical job, can't really do away with that. Training, can't really do away with that. You can kind of change your training around to manage your fatigue and not getting burnout or overtraining. But a big one that we can change here is if we have other things going on, other projects, other stuff, home remodel, whatever it may be, that can kind of take a break and wait, or you can do some little things here and there, but you don't need to go, full bore on doing that until afterwards. Then along with that, we want to make sure that we are doing some recovery practices as far as stretching, doing Epsom salt baths and ice baths. And the whole thing with ice baths, mainly just don't do them right after training, okay? I usually like to do mine on rest days when I'm being really good about it. I like to stretch or do some type of like cardio, something, stretch, and then ice bath, right? To help get rid of inflammation, all that stuff, okay? And then trying to get good sleep. So if your sleep's bad, try to make your sleep better by taking, there's really good sleep aids that are non-prescribed, or something better that'd be like a NyQuil or a ZQuil. There's a ton of stuff out there that will help. So trying to keep your stress low, because if we look at it on a scale, okay, a fatigue scale, if our standard fatigue is, here from just day-to-day stuff, and we add in training, and then we add in prep, and we're up here, okay? So then we're not doing any of that, and it just keeps building and building and building. But if we add in those recovery practices, then we are going to help lower that. So we may be, still rising, but we're gonna keep dropping it, and then we're just gonna be rising a little bit higher, less time, keeping that low, which is gonna help out with performance when it comes to comp time, because there is a thing of being overtrained or overstimulated, over-fatigued going into a competition. And it's also gonna help out with your cut. So let's say everything goes perfect, all the stars align, okay, throughout your prep, leading up to getting to the competition, everything. And let's say you're, 12 pounds over. That's a good range for men and women, okay? So you're 12 pounds over, you're going into your final 5 to 6 weeks, you're keeping your calories a little bit higher, even though, you're gonna have to lose, 10 to 12 pounds. Usually what happens is that last week of training going into your cut week, all things go well, you might drop a few pounds just because your body relaxes a little bit, but let's say that doesn't happen, okay? So you're 10 to 12 pounds over, you're doing everything right, you're keeping your carbs on as high as you can, without gaining weight, obviously, but you're doing enough to maintain and all those things, okay? So then we go into that cut week, say we're water loading, all right? You start your water load and you might hold on to a little bit, right? Because on average, if you're drinking 2 gallons of water a day in the load, that's 16 pounds of water along with food, okay? So if your weight does go up, don't freak out about that, because you are obviously holding on to more water, which is fine, what we want. But you go from there, you go from the load and you start tapering things out. Weight starts dropping down good. You start pulling back food, tapering out water, going into that day before weigh-ins, and all goes well. Weight's coming down good. I like to give people food, a little bit of food, a little bit more food of what we can on the day before weigh-ins, if we can. But, food or not food, you got to go 24 hours without eating, not a huge deal, right? So pulling down, everything's coming good. You roll into weigh-ins, a pound, maybe 2 pounds under, and you're good to go, okay? But you can make all of that happen by not stressing about it and not freaking out, because that, from what I've seen with, myself and a lot of people I work with, is that being stressed about it is doing everything but helping, okay? So you can only do what you can do, and you can do the best you can do and just follow whatever plan you're following, whatever plan you're on, follow the plan, and just try. I know everybody says trust the process, but really just trust the process and understand that when we get to that time, everything's gonna work out, even if you do have to sweat a little bit.